Have you ever wondered what secrets a billionaire could be hiding? Black twins call for help, help our mom, she's dying. The millionaire froze when he saw who it was. Please, sir, our mom can't breathe. The desperate voice cut through the cold morning air like a knife. James Mitchell stopped in the middle of the Manhattan sidewalk, almost spilling the coffee he was carrying to his mouth. Two black girls, no older than 8, ran toward him with tears streaming down their dirty faces. She's really hot and keeps coughing up blood, shouted the second girl, clutching James' coat sleeve. We don't know what to do. James looked around. The busy street continued its morning routine. Hurried executives, tourists with cameras, street vendors. Everyone passed by them as if they were invisible, as always happened with children like these. He was about to offer some money and go on his way when the first girl lifted her face. James felt the world stop. The almond-shaped eyes, the shape of her nose, the delicate curve of her lips. It was like looking at a ghost. What are your names? He asked, his voice coming out hoarse. I'm Jade and she's Ruby, said the girl, wiping her nose on the sleeve of her worn coat. Our mommy's name is Diana Santos. Diana Santos. The name hit James like a punch in the stomach. 16 years. 16 years since his family had solved the problem of that black woman who had dared to get pregnant by the Mitchell heir. 16 years since his father had made sure she disappeared from their lives forever. James Mitchell was 42 years old and controlled a real estate empire worth $2 billion. He had built skyscrapers, bought senators, and destroyed competitors without losing a night's sleep. But at that moment, looking at those desperate faces, he felt something he hadn't felt in decades. Pure fear. Where is she? He asked, throwing his coffee in the nearest trash can. At the shelter on 83rd Street. She passed out this morning and won't wake up, Ruby said, pulling him by the hand. The others say it's God's will, but we know someone needs to help them. Not fear of poverty or disease. Fear that those girls were exactly who he suspected they were. And if they were, it meant that his family had lied to him for 16 years. It meant that Diana hadn't left of her own accord as he had always been told. Let's go, he said, hailing a taxi. Let's go see your mom. As the car cut through traffic toward the poor side of town, James watched the two girls in the back seat. Jade drew nervously on the steamed-up window while Ruby fiddled with a simple necklace around her neck. A necklace he recognized immediately. It was the graduation ring he had given Diana 16 years ago, turned into a pendant by a cheap chain. She had kept it. After everything her family had done, Diana had kept it. The taxi stopped in front of a dilapidated building. The smell of mold and cheap disinfectant assaulted his nostrils as they entered. James followed the girls down narrow hallways until they reached a tiny room with 6 bunk beds lined up in rows. Diana was on the bottom bunk, too thin, too pale, breathing with difficulty. But it was still her. It was still the woman he had loved with an intensity that had frightened the entire Mitchell family. Mommy, Jade whispered, holding her hand. We brought help. Diana opened her eyes slowly. When she saw James, a tear rolled down her cheek. James, she murmured. Is this real or am I dreaming again? He knelt beside the bed, not caring about the dirty floor. It's real, Diana. I'm here. You came. The girls found me, he said, looking at Jade and Ruby. Diana nodded weakly. Your daughters, James. Our daughters. The world collapsed around him. 16 years of lies. 16 years in which his family had made him believe that Diana had chosen money over love. 16 years in which his daughters had grown up in poverty while he slept in silk sheets. James grabbed his cell phone and dialed his personal physician. Dr. Patterson, James Mitchell. I need a private ambulance now and prepare a suite at Mount Sinai Hospital. While they waited for the ambulance, Diana held his hand with what little strength she had left. They said you didn't want to know me, she whispered. They said you sent me money to make me go away. I never knew, James replied, feeling anger rise in his chest like lava. I swear to God, I never knew. But as he looked at the woman he had loved so deeply and the 2 daughters he had never known, James realized there had been signs. Small signs he had ignored over the years. The conversations that stopped when he entered the room, the documents his father kept in safes he never questioned. His family's insistence that he move on when Diana disappeared. There was more to this story than a simple breakup. And if you're feeling the same outrage as James right now, subscribe to Black Voices, because what he discovered about his own family was far worse than anyone could have imagined. The private suite at Mount Sinai Hospital was a world away from the filthy shelter where James had found Diana. Immaculate white walls, state-of-the-art equipment, and a panoramic view of Manhattan that cost more per day than most people earned in a month. Diana was hooked up to monitors that beeped softly. Her breathing finally stabilized after hours of intensive treatment. The doctors confirmed severe pneumonia aggravated by chronic malnutrition. A few more days without treatment, and she wouldn't be here, Dr. Patterson had said with the gravity of someone who knew the difference between life and death. Jade and Ruby sat in chairs beside the bed, still wearing the threadbare clothes from that morning, but now with clean faces and full bellies for the first time in weeks. They watched their mother's every move with the intensity of those who had lost everything once and feared losing it again. "Is she going to be okay?" Ruby asked for the 10th time, holding Diana's hand with her small trembling fingers. "Yes," James replied, sitting down beside them. "She'll be fine." But as he spoke, his cell phone vibrated incessantly. 32 missed calls from his mother, 15 from his brother Charles, 8 from Victoria, his fiancée. The news had spread through Manhattan's elite like wildfire. James Mitchell, heir to a real estate empire, had shown up at a public hospital with 2 black children claiming to be his daughters. The first confrontation came in the form of Victoria Sterling, who burst through the suite door like a storm in Louboutin heels. Her normally perfect face was contorted with a mixture of anger and barely concealed disgust. "James, for God's sake, what is this madness?" she hissed, casting contemptuous glances at the girls. "You've been gone all day and now I find you playing charity dad to this." "Watch your mouth, Victoria," James said, rising slowly. "These are my daughters." "Daughters?" Victoria laughed with a bitterness that made Jade cringe in her chair. "James, do you have any idea what this means for our family? For our marriage, for the business?" James looked at the woman he had been engaged to for 2 years and realized he had never really known her. In her eyes, he saw no concern or understanding, only cold calculation of how the situation would affect her social standing. "The girls are staying," he said with a finality that made Victoria take a step back. "And if that's a problem for you?" "Oh, it will be a problem for a lot more people than me," Victoria interrupted, regaining her poisonous composure. "Her mother is on her way, and she's not happy." Margaret Mitchell arrived 40 minutes later with Charles at her side, both dressed in the invisible armor of American aristocracy. She had aged well, maintaining at 72 the imperial bearing that intimidated senators and company presidents. "James," she said, her voice cutting through the air like crystal. "We need to talk in private." "No," he replied without hesitation. "Whatever you have to say can be said here." Margaret shot a contemptuous glance at the unconscious Diana and the girls who instinctively hugged each other. "Very well. This woman has come back to extort our family. It's not the first time she's tried." "What do you mean, not the first time?" James felt something cold form in his stomach. Charles cleared his throat uncomfortably. "James, you need to understand that over the years she tried to contact you several times." Margaret interrupted with the casual cruelty of someone swatting insects. "Dramatic letters, tearful phone calls, pathetic appearances at the office. Always the same story about children and fatherhood. And you never told me." James's voice was dangerously low. "Why would we?" Margaret waved her hand as if shooing away a fly. "So you could throw away everything our family has worked for. So you could destroy his future for a youthful indiscretion." "A youthful indiscretion?" James repeated, feeling anger rise like lava in his bones. "I loved Diana." "You were 22, Charles said condescendingly. "You were young, romantic, impressionable. That woman saw an opportunity and shut up." The words came out like a gunshot. "You know those girls are my daughters." Margaret sighed as if dealing with a stubborn child.